Welcome to Chimney Smoke Distant Whispers, a peaceful and comforting sleep story designed to help you unwind and drift into a restful sleep. If you find this story soothing and enjoyable, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more tranquil audio experiences. Before we begin Clara's journey at Bramble Cottage, let's take a few moments for a gentle breathing exercise. Or if you're ready to dive right into the story, you can find the chapter timestamps conveniently located in the description below. Find a comfortable position, either lying down or sitting up, and close your eyes if that feels right for you. Let your body relax completely, releasing any tension you might be holding in your muscles. Allow your shoulders to soften, your jaw to unclench, and your forehead to smooth out. Imagine yourself settling into a cozy armchair by a crackling fire, just like Clara in her cottage, ready to let go of the day's worries. Let's begin by taking a deep, slow breath in through your nose, filling your lungs completely. Imagine you're breathing in the clean, crisp air of the countryside, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke and pine. Hold it for a moment, savoring the stillness, and then gently exhale through your mouth, releasing any stress or tension you may be carrying. As you breathe out, imagine the distant whispers of the wind, carrying away any lingering thoughts or worries. Continue to breathe deeply and slowly, focusing on the gentle rhythm of your breath. With each inhale, feel your body expanding and filling with warmth and peace. With each exhale, feel your body softening and releasing. If your mind wanders, simply acknowledge the thought and gently guide your attention back to your breath or to the sound of my voice. Soon you will find yourself strolling with Clara in the brambles behind her home. Now let the comforting tale of Chimney Smoke Distant Whispers envelop you and allow yourself to drift into a serene and peaceful sleep. Chapter 1. The First Fire of Autumn. Clara awoke to a chill in the air that spoke of autumn's undeniable arrival. Sunlight, still holding a summery golden hue, streamed through her bedroom window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the quiet air. She stretched languidly, feeling the gentle ache of her joints, a reminder of her years, but not an unwelcome one. It was a familiar feeling, a sign of a life well lived and a body that had carried her through countless seasons. She rose and padded down the wooden stairs, each creak a familiar greeting. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves drifted in from the slightly ajar kitchen window, a promise of the day's crisp air. Clara poured herself a glass of water, noticing the condensation forming on the outside, a tangible sign of the temperature difference between inside and out. The thought of lighting the first fire of autumn had been on her mind all week. There was something deeply satisfying about the ritual, a symbolic welcoming of the colder months, and a promise of warmth and comfort within the walls of her cottage. She gathered kindling from the woodpile on the porch, the dry branches crackling softly in her hands. The rough texture of the wood grounded her, connecting her to the earth and the cycles of nature. Inside, She arranged the kindling carefully in the fireplace, layering it with larger logs she had gathered earlier. The scent of pine permeated the air, sharp and invigorating. With a practiced hand, she struck a match and held it to the tinder. The flame flickered hesitantly at first, then caught, spreading eagerly to the dry wood. Clara watched as the fire grew, the flames dancing and twisting in a mesmerizing display. The sound of the crackling wood filled the room, a comforting symphony of warmth and light. As the fire gained strength, she added another log, feeling the heat radiating outwards, chasing away the morning chill. She settled into her favorite armchair, a worn and comfortable piece that had been with her for years. Pulling a soft wool blanket around her, she closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the feeling of warmth and security. The scent of wood smoke filled the air, a comforting and nostalgic aroma that evoked memories of past autumns and cozy evenings spent by the fire. She stirred a simmering pot of cinnamon and cloves on the stove, the spicy aroma mingling with the scent of wood smoke. The gentle bubbling of the pot added another layer to the symphony of comforting sounds. Clara poured herself a cup of the fragrant mixture, the warmth spreading through her as she sipped it slowly. The distant whisper of the wind outside seemed to echo the crackling of the fire, creating a sense of harmony and connection between the inside and the outside. Clara opened her eyes and gazed out the window, watching as the leaves swirled and danced in the wind. The world outside seemed to be preparing for a period of rest, a time of quiet contemplation and inward reflection. And so was Clara. She picked up the book that lay upon the nearby table, a collection of poems by a local artist. She opened up to the first page and began to read aloud. The words slowly melted away any lingering tension, and Clara felt a wave of calm gently wash over her, inviting her into the serenity of autumn's embrace. As she continued to sip her tea and read her book, she felt a sense of deep contentment settle over her. She was home, safe and warm, surrounded by the comforting sights, sounds, and scents of autumn. She closed her eyes again, feeling the warmth of the fire on her skin, the gentle whisper of the wind in her ears, and the comforting scent of wood smoke in her nostrils. Chapter 2. A Walk Through the Brambles. The fire still crackled merrily in the hearth as Clara prepared for her morning walk. After a breakfast of warm porridge with honey, she pulled on her well-worn boots and a thick woolen coat, ready to face the crisp autumn air. The sun, now higher in the sky, cast long shadows across the landscape, painting the world in hues of gold and amber. She stepped outside, inhaling deeply the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The air was cool and invigorating, a refreshing contrast to the warmth of the cottage. Clara made her way towards the brambles behind her cottage, a wild and untamed area that she had come to cherish. The path was narrow and winding, overgrown with thorny bushes and fallen leaves. Clara navigated it carefully, her boots crunching on the dry leaves underfoot. The gentle rustling of the leaves in the breeze created a soothing sound, a natural symphony that calmed her mind. She noticed the changing colors of the leaves, from vibrant reds and oranges to faded yellows and browns. Each leaf was unique, a testament to the beauty and diversity of nature. Clara stopped to admire a particularly striking maple leaf, its vibrant colors a splash of brilliance against the muted tones of the landscape. As she walked deeper into the brambles, she observed the delicate patterns of frost on the ground. The frost sparkled in the sunlight, creating a magical and ethereal effect. Clara bent down to examine a patch of frost more closely, marveling at the intricate designs formed by the tiny ice crystals. She spotted a group of squirrels busily gathering nuts, preparing for the long winter ahead. Their quick, darting movements were a flurry of energy in the otherwise still landscape. Clara watched them for a few moments, amused by their industriousness. She smiled softly, knowing how much nature was busy even during this seemingly still time. She heard the distant calls of birds, their cheerful songs a reminder of the vibrant life that still thrived in the autumn landscape. Clara scanned the branches overhead, trying to spot the birds, but they remained hidden among the leaves. She didn't mind. Their songs were enough to bring a smile to her face. As she continued her walk, Clara collected a few fallen branches for the fireplace. The dry wood was light and brittle, easily snapping in her hands. She gathered a small bundle, feeling the satisfaction of providing for her own needs. She paused for a moment to rest on a fallen log, closing her eyes and listening to the sounds of nature. The wind whispered through the trees, the leaves rustled softly, and the birds sang their cheerful songs. Clara felt a sense of deep peace and contentment wash over her. She thought of all the changes she had gone through this year, the change in season and the recent change in her life, retiring to Bramble Cottage. It had been a big adjustment, but she knew in her heart that it was the right decision. She was surrounded by beauty, by peace, and by the comforting rhythms of nature. She was finally home. As she made her way back to the cottage, Clara felt refreshed and invigorated. The walk through the brambles had cleared her mind and filled her with a sense of gratitude. She knew that she would continue to take these walks, drawing strength and inspiration from the beauty of the natural world. The branches were carried back to her cottage and stacked neatly by the fireplace, anticipating their future contribution to the warmth and comfort she had come to know. Chapter 3. The Comfort of a Journal. The wind howled softly around the cottage, a distant whisper that seemed to carry Clara's thoughts away. It was a blustery afternoon, too cold and wet to venture outside, so she decided to spend the day indoors, indulging in the comfort of her journal. She settled into her favorite armchair by the fire, the warmth radiating outwards, chasing away the chill. The scent of wood smoke filled the air, a comforting and familiar aroma. Clara opened her journal, a worn and leather-bound volume that had been her constant companion for many years. She picked up her pen, a smooth and elegant instrument that felt like an extension of her hand. The ink flowed effortlessly onto the page, forming words that reflected her thoughts and feelings. Clara began to write about her day, describing her morning walk through the brambles and her observations of the changing autumn landscape. As she wrote, she reflected on her past, her present, and her hopes for the future. She thought about her years as a school teacher, the countless students she had taught, and the lessons she had learned. She smiled softly, remembering the joy and satisfaction she had found in her work. She also thought about her present life at Bramble Cottage, her newfound freedom and independence, and her growing connection to the natural world. She was grateful for the peace and quiet she had found, and for the opportunity to live a simpler, more meaningful life. She turned the page and began to write about her hopes for the future. She hoped to continue to explore the beauty of the countryside, to deepen her understanding of nature, and to find new ways to contribute to her community. As she wrote, Clara felt a sense of clarity and purpose emerge. The act of putting her thoughts down on paper helped her to organize her mind and to gain a better understanding of herself. The wind picked up its pace, creating a soft drumming sound along the cottage walls. The soft echo filled the room, keeping Clara company as she reflected on her life. She wrote about her neighbor, Mr. Abernathy, an elderly gentleman who had become a dear friend. She appreciated his wisdom, his kindness, and his stories of the countryside. She hoped to spend more time with him, learning from his experiences and sharing her own. Clara closed her journal, feeling a sense of contentment and peace. The act of writing had calmed her mind and filled her with a sense of purpose. She set the journal aside and gazed out the window, watching as the wind whipped the trees back and forth. She saw a group of birds huddled together on a branch, seeking shelter from the storm. Their resilience and adaptability inspired her. She knew that she, too, could weather any storm, as long as she remained grounded in her values and connected to the beauty of the natural world. Clara picked up her knitting, a ball of soft wool in a calming shade of blue. She began to knit, the rhythmic clicking of the needles a soothing and meditative sound. As she knitted, she thought about all the people in her life who had brought her joy and comfort. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for their love and support. The wind continued to howl outside, but inside the cottage, Clara felt safe and warm. She was surrounded by the things she loved: her fire, her journal, her knitting, and the comforting scent of woodsmoke. She was content. As evening drew near, Clara set her knitting down and closed her eyes, allowing herself to drift off to sleep. Chapter 4. Baking Bread, Sharing Warmth. Clara awoke to the gentle patter of rain on the roof. The sound was soothing and peaceful, a lullaby that lulled her back into a state of semi-consciousness. She stretched languidly, feeling the warmth of the blankets around her. After a leisurely breakfast, Clara decided to spend the day baking bread. The thought of the warm, comforting aroma filling the cottage with joy was an irresistible allure. Baking had always been a source of relaxation and satisfaction for her, a way to express her creativity and to nourish herself and others. She gathered her ingredients, flour, yeast, water, and salt, and began to measure them out carefully. The feel of the flour sifting through her fingers was soft and grounding. Clara added the ingredients to a large mixing bowl and began to knead the dough. The process was rhythmic and meditative, a way to release any tension or stress. As she kneaded the dough, she felt the soft texture beneath her fingers, the subtle give and take of the flour and water. The scent of yeast filled the air, a yeasty aroma that spoke of warmth and life. Clara kneaded the dough for several minutes until it was smooth and elastic. She placed the dough in a warm bowl, covered it with a cloth, and set it aside to rise. While the dough was rising, Clara tidied up the kitchen, wiping down the counters and washing the dishes. The sound of the running water was calming and rhythmic. Once the dough had doubled in size, Clara punched it down gently and shaped it into a loaf. She placed the loaf in a greased baking pan and set it aside to rise again. The rain tapped more intensely against the cottage windows, urging Clara to stay warm by the stove. As the loaf rose, Clara prepared a small loaf for Mr. Abernathy, her kind and elderly neighbor. She knew that he would appreciate a warm loaf of bread, especially on a rainy day. The image of his kind smile brought her happiness. Finally, it was time to bake the bread. Clara preheated the oven to 375 degrees and placed the loaves inside. The warmth of the oven filled the cottage with a comforting heat. As the bread baked, the aroma filled the air, a warm and inviting scent that evoked memories of childhood and home. Clara sat by the window, watching as the rain continued to fall. The world outside was gray and misty, but inside the cottage, it was warm and bright. She felt content and peaceful, surrounded by the comforting aromas of baking bread. After an hour, the bread was golden brown and fragrant. Clara carefully removed the loaves from the oven and set them aside to cool. She wrapped Mr. Abernathy's loaf in a clean cloth and set out to deliver it. She walked through the rain, her umbrella shielding her from the worst of the weather. As she approached Mr. Abernathy's cottage, she saw him standing on his porch watching her approach. He smiled warmly as she handed him the loaf of bread. "Thank you, Clara," he said. "This is very kind of you." "It was my pleasure," Clara replied. "I hope you enjoy it." "I'm sure I will," Mr. Abernathy said. "Come inside and have a cup of tea with me." Clara accepted his invitation and stepped inside his cozy cottage. The scent of wood smoke filled the air, a familiar and comforting aroma. They sat by the fire, sipping tea and sharing stories. Clara felt grateful for the friendship she had found with Mr. Abernathy. He was a kind and wise man, and she valued his companionship. She was also grateful for the simple pleasures of life, the warmth of the fire, the scent of baking bread, and the friendship of a neighbor. Chapter 5. Stargazing from the Porch. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and crisp. The clouds had parted, revealing a sky full of twinkling stars. Clara, wrapped in a warm blanket, decided to sit on her porch and gaze at the night sky. The night was quiet, save for the distant whispers of the wind and the occasional hoot of an owl. The stars shone brightly, illuminating the landscape with their gentle light. Clara took a deep breath, inhaling the cool, fresh air. She marveled at the vastness of the universe and the smallness of her place within it. She thought about all the stars and planets, the galaxies and nebulae, and the countless possibilities that existed beyond her understanding. The expanse made her feel insignificant and small, and the feeling was, surprisingly, calming. She identified a few familiar constellations: the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, and Orion. She remembered learning about them as a child, listening to her father tell stories about the myths and legends associated with each constellation. She wished he were here to experience this with her. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to be enveloped by the darkness and the silence. She felt a sense of peace and wonder settle over her. She was grateful for the beauty of the night sky and for the opportunity to experience it in all its glory. She opened her eyes and noticed a shooting star streak across the sky. She quickly made a wish, hoping for peace and happiness for herself and for those she loved. Clara felt a soft flutter of hopefulness as the star streaked across the sky. She sat on her porch for several hours, gazing at the stars and contemplating the mysteries of the universe. She felt a deep connection to something larger than herself, a sense of belonging and interconnectedness. The hours drifted by as Clara rested comfortably, gazing into the inky black sky. As the night wore on, the stars began to fade and the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon. Clara knew that it was time to go inside and get some sleep. She stood up, stretched her limbs, and yawned. She walked inside the cottage, feeling refreshed and invigorated by her time spent under the stars. She climbed into bed, pulled the blankets around her, and closed her eyes. As she drifted off to sleep, she remembered the beauty of the night sky and the sense of peace and wonder it had inspired in her. She knew that she would continue to gaze at the stars, finding solace and inspiration in their gentle light. She drifted off to a peaceful sleep and dreamt of vast open skies. The distant whispers of the wind carried through the trees. All was well.